Alrighty everyone, welcome back. So we continue kind of the little video series we've been doing of talking about teams, free agents, and off seasons, I guess, with the Washington Capitals. And the Capitals had arguably one of, if not the most active offseason amongst all the teams. No one can deny that. There's a lot of things you disagree with. That's one thing you can't. They made a lot of trades, a lot of signings, and their lineup looks pretty different from last season, and it's definitely something that Todd McLellan, before he promoted Chris Patrick to GM a few days ago, he said that we wanted to make some moves to improve the roster and make this team better in the long term. Because yes, they made the playoffs, but you look at it, they were tied with Detroit, who could have, gone over them had they won even one more game or got one more point. So regardless of that, regardless of whatever you think about that, they still made the playoffs, but they want to get back into the playoffs again next year and maybe do some damage. And that's what they're trying to do here with these moves. So let's start off at the beginning. They lose in round one to the Rangers in a 4-game sweep. Obviously, that was something that was looked at then as not a surprise to most people. I'm sure Capitals fans were very happy that they got themselves into the playoffs, but obviously they really didn't do a whole lot in the playoffs, which was expected. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. You're playing the President's Trophy winning Rangers. Everyone was in favor of the Rangers to beat the Capitals. So that is something that was not a surprise. Then, as the season winded down and the playoffs got down to the finals, the Capitals started making trades, and they made a lot of trades. So we'll start off with probably the most controversial one. They acquired Pierre-Luc Dubois from the LA Kings in exchange for Darcy Kuemper in a 1-for-1 trade. Now, this was, I think, a few days before the Stanley Cup Finals were over. I think it was like Game 6, the day of Game 6 when it happened. But regardless of that, it's an interesting 1-for-1 deal because both players really struggled in their respective cities. Like, Dubois had a horrible year in LA. I talked about it a lot this past season. And Kuemper just never really got off the ground in Washington. Had a lot of injury problems in the 2 seasons he was there and just was not the goalie that we saw of him in previous seasons. So they do a 1-for-1 swap here of 2 really bad contracts. Kuemper goes the other way and they get Dubois in Washington. And Dubois is a player who has kind of said that he doesn't want to play in certain places. He's very active in the media. He said multiple times before that he doesn't want to play in Columbus, doesn't want to play in Winnipeg. He didn't say anything about LA as far as I know. But regardless, he finds himself on his 3rd team here in the last 3 seasons. So it's something interesting there about Dubois. But I feel like you can't really say it's a bad trade until you look at how he does under the Caps system. The Caps play a different system than anyone else in the league, as pretty much a lot of the teams do. So we'll see how Dubois does in that system. But obviously, when you look at it, yeah, the Capitals got the worser contract. Not to say that Dubois won't be the worst player in that deal, but obviously, when you look at it in terms of that is kind of a controversial move that got a lot of Caps fans and some NHL fans kind of talking about it a little bit. But I do think that it could turn out good. It's a high-risk, high-reward type trade when you look at that. So you look at the second one here now. They acquired Andrew Mangiapane from the Calgary Flames in exchange for a 2025 second-round pick. So you'll notice that they didn't move like any of the big picks, but they moved a lot of future assets to acquire some players here. And Mangiapane is an interesting one because the last couple of seasons he struggled with the Calgary Flames, but in previous years he has scored a consistent 30-goal year, if I'm correct. This past year was kind of a struggle in Calgary, and I think part of it too is that Calgary's really trying to revamp their roster over there. They made a lot of moves, trading players away, getting a lot of future assets, and this was part of that. But when you look at it in terms of Washington, he's still relatively young. He's not like super young, but he's also not criminally old, which is something that the Capitals have an issue with. They have a lot of older players on their roster, but I feel like with some of these moves, they got younger. I'm not going to lie. They got younger with a lot of these trades. So Mangiapane, a solid add there for the top 6. I think he could be a good second-line guy. Then they went on and acquired a goalie on the second day of the draft. They got Logan Thompson from the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for a 2024 third-round pick. I think that Thompson will fit in as a great backup. He actually said that he wanted to leave Vegas, so it's fitting that he goes to Washington, the team they lost to in their inaugural year in the finals. And I think Thompson, again, is a solid, could be a good backup goalie to Lindgren, could even be a solid 1A, 1B option. But again, Vegas has a lot of goalies, so that was something that they wanted to move out of there. And I think Thompson fits in well in probably the backup role. Again, he could be a 1A, 1B situation, but we'll find out training camp. I am assuming Charlie Lindgren will be the starter, though. Then on free agency day, the day of free agency frenzy, where it's mostly signings, there was a trade that the Capitals made. They acquired Jakob Chychrun from the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Nick Jensen and a 2025 third. So, honestly, they did pretty damn good in all of these trades. And the Chychrun one, I think, is the biggest. You just hit it out of the park. Chychrun, I think he's a 26-year-old defenseman who put up not so great numbers in Ottawa, but really struggled there. I think in Washington's system could be great in that top four defense. Could even go to first pairing right away, to be honest. It makes that defense way better. And Jensen was a guy who had okay defensive numbers, but still, I think I'm taking Chychrun over Jensen 100%. So they made good moves there at acquiring Jakob Chychrun, and I think they hit it out of the park there. And again, Ottawa kind of had their hands tied with that. That's something you could talk about in a later video. I might talk about that in a later video, but I do think that they hit it out of the park there with the Chychrun deal. You look in terms of free agents that they signed. They signed, I think 3 were the main big guys they signed. They signed a few guys to entry-level contracts, but apart from that, they got Brandon Duhaime on a 2-year, $1.85 million contract, Taylor Radish on a 1x1, and then they also got Matt Waugh on a 6-year, $5.75 million contract. So I'm going to start off with Duhaime and Radish. I think they're 2 very solid third and fourth line forwards. They're good guys for grit, secondary scoring at points, and I think that they could be a great fit for Washington. I like all those moves a lot, and I think Waugh fits in perfectly on that second pairing with maybe Rasmus Sandin, or if Fehervary moves up, but I would imagine it's Rasmus Sandin. It makes that defense look pretty good, I'm not going to lie. So, again, as I said in the title of this video, I have loved what the Washington Capitals have done, and I've just said it throughout this entire video. And this is someone who is a Flyers fan. And I hated the way the Caps got into the playoffs. I hated the way how, they lost in 4 games. I wish it was my team. And, of course, because I think the Capitals would say the same thing if the Flyers made it over them or the Red Wings did. But regardless, I can't hate this. And I love these moves. I think all of these moves have been really good for Washington. And it makes this team overall a lot better. They also drafted Tariq Parasak at 17th overall. They also drafted some other guys later in the draft that look pretty solid too. So maybe that's a prospect pool overview video that'll come soon. You'll see. But regardless, I think it's time to look at their projected lineups now and see if this team is better in the long term now. A little disclaimer, there is no TJ Oshie and there is no Nick Backstrom in these lineups. I don't think Backstrom's going to play. Oshie, it's kind of a question of whether he's going to come back or not. But obviously, you'd filter him into the lineup regardless. But here is your top 6. We'll start off with that. So, it is Alex Ovechkin, Dylan Strome, Tom Wilson on the first line, Connor McMichael, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Andrew Mangiapane on the second line. So, I would say that the adds of Dubois and Mangiapane make that top 6 a lot better. Mangiapane, again, a solid scorer, can score good on that line. And I think Dubois centering McMichael and Mange, I think that worked out well. I think that's perfect for what the Caps are trying to do there. Bottom 6, Sonny Milano, Hendrix Lapierre, Taylor Radish for the third line, Brandon Duhaime, Nick Dowd, and Alexei Protes for the fourth line. So, you got some solid grit players there, depth guys, secondary scorers. Again, Duhaime and Radish fit in well in the third and fourth lines respectively, and I think that adds of Protes and Dowd could work out well too. And that's not even counting out the fact that there could be some guys who make this lineup out of training camp. There are a lot of guys in Hershey who played really well in the Calder Cup Finals. There's a decent chance that one of them gets a chance in the NHL next season. So we'll see. But obviously we're a little ways away from that. We are in the middle of July. So Defense. Defense, again, I think got a lot better when you look in terms of the main defensive core. First pairing, Chychrun and Karlsson. Second pairing, Rasmus Sandin and Matt Waugh. Third pairing, Martin Fehervary and Trevor Van Riemsdyk. So, again, the top four is spectacular. Chychrun and Karlsson, great defensive pairing there. I think that's going to work out really well. Second pairing is a young defenseman in Sandin and Matt Waugh, good defensively. I think that's a great top four. Third pairing, Fehervary and TVR. It makes up well for the third pairing. I'm not entirely too sure how that will work out. Maybe there may be some changes. Maybe somebody down below makes it up to the NHL. You really don't know. These are just projected lineups that I made. But regardless, or that the Daily Faceoff made. I didn't make these, but regardless, it's still a really good defensive pairing there. Your goaltending should be Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson. I don't imagine Hunter Shepard would be your backup. Maybe Shepard will play a few games up in the NHL, but he's kind of asserted himself as an American Hockey League goalie, unfortunately. But hey, the Bears are trying to go back and win a third straight Calder Cup, so I wouldn't complain about that. But regardless, I would say the team is a lot better than they were at the end of the season. I would say that the adds they made, I think they're pretty spectacular, and I do think that this team will probably be a playoff team next year. Not going to lie to you. I feel like they probably will be a playoff team next year. Now, the only concern that I do have is that they are over the salary cap. According to Cap Wages, not Cap Friendly, because that got bought by the Capitals, ironically, which, again, is a thing that we could talk about later, but it's a good business move for Washington. But they are over the cap. Now, what I would imagine they're going to do is put Backstrom and Oshie on LTIR, and then things will work out. But I feel like there's a chance they might have to trade someone. So we'll see if something happens there before now in training camp. I would imagine there will be a few trades between them now. We just had a trade today between the Senators and the Oilers, so it wouldn't surprise me. But regardless, I have loved what the Capitals have been doing. I think that the moves they have made have been nothing short of spectacular, and I think that they have a really bright future ahead if they keep trying to get younger with these adds that they got. So, anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. We'll see what changes between now and training camp, but right now, the Caps look pretty good. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe down below. I would greatly appreciate it. We are getting closer to 3,000 subscribers, almost at 2.8K, so that's pretty awesome. But regardless, thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.